All right. So awesome. So yeah, like I said, my name is John Bruce, and this is my 12th year of teaching. I've been in our school district for 4 years now. The last 2 years have gone by extremely quickly for me. They kind of feel like they were just fast forwarded with the pandemic. I'm kind of brushing off some of my own rust as far as my distance teaching and learning goes. So forgive me if there are little technical glitches or like that. Um, the yes, links. And if someone could be so kind as to kind of relink things as necessary, there's a Jamboard link that's floating in the chat. So if someone asks in the chat for any kinds of links or resources, I'd appreciate that. As I think all of us will appreciate the resourcefulness in the room. Let's make sure that we've got that here. There we go, repasting for you.
Okay.
Yeah, so this is my 4th year in the district, and I'm happy to be here with you today. And let's just kind of get right into it. I wanted to just start by priming our time. We're going to be together today for about an hour, 2 hours and 15 minutes. So this is your time. You guys are all professionals. I really respect the people that I've met so far in the district. And so what you put into this time really determines what you'll take away. Like I said, I'm going to be providing some context and some ideas. Some of this might be very well familiar to you, and that's totally fine. Some of this might be new, and that's great too. But please, whenever you have any additional commentary, if you'd like to elaborate on anything or pose new questions, please feel free to do that. It's all going to add up to what you walk away with. We are all professionals in this room, and I want you to please feel free to chime in if you'd like. Just click your hand button and I can open up the mic for you. And the last thing I want you to feel is that your voice is not respected in here. And the last thing I want you to feel is that this is some kind of a waste of your time. This is time that's very essential, and I value it greatly. So please just click your raise hand and I'll open that up for you. Use the chat as well, and chat monitor. Please let me know if I miss anything. So if there's something important brought up in the chat that needs to come up into the larger conversation, I use the phrase chat monitor, but if someone could please just bring that to my attention so that we can fold it into the larger conversation. Could I get a volunteer to help me out with that? McLean, I see your hand. Thank you. I appreciate that. So if something pops up in the chat to bring to the group, just feel free to unmute and we'll fold that in. There will be no designated break time, so feel free, if you just need a break, go ahead and take your own break. We're all adults, so just do your thing, and no worries about that. Generally speaking, this is our agenda for our time today, so it's kind of broken up into 3 parts. Want to kind of break down self-efficacy, what it is, what its role is in a learning community, and then kind of crack open some of the theory and research behind it. Look at some examples of how it works, and get into some examples of, here in our district even, how it works or how it has worked in the past. We'll be doing some collective annotations. I have a program that I want to introduce. Sometimes I like to just pitch, apps and new little things. So we've got a program that I hope you find value in and that you can take it to your classroom if you'd like to. And finally, I wanted to really make sure that you have applicable strategies and teaching moves that you can take away and bring to your classrooms, things that you can actually kind of put in your pocket, so to speak. So finally, there are all kinds of different experience levels in the room. So new teachers, if you're new to the profession, I'd really like to invite you to focus on the following. There's so much evaluative focus on your content and how you deliver that content effectively to your students. But I want to challenge you, without considering your content area, in what ways can cultivating self-efficacy in students enhance your teaching and their learning? So if you're a math teacher, I would like to invite you to put your math aside and to focus just on self-efficacy and what it can do for your students. And veteran teachers, I want to kind of take a different angle with you. How can cultivating student self-efficacy deepen students' knowledge and abilities in your content area? So kind of posing 2 different opposite approaches, if you will, to new teachers and veteran teachers. So just to kind of keep our sails set, these are a couple of different overarching questions for you to consider today. Finally, takeaways. I want to provide you with an entry point into or a reminder of social cognitive theory. I want to provide you with a new framework for thinking about learning, a lens for refining and improving the learning experience. And I want you to also walk away with some actionable strategies for application in the learning that you facilitate in your personal and professional life. So if you don't walk away with any of these things, you can write it in the survey. I'd appreciate the feedback. If I could do any of this better, let me know. This is my first time presenting for our district PD. So let's jump right in. This is an image that I thought would be perfect to kick off our time today. And it's an image of just a person with a backpack walking into the woods. And why this person's walking into the woods, we're not so sure. We don't really know yet. But before we kind of start this path and walk down this trail together, I have a poll in the chat that I'd like you to respond to, if you would. And the question is, what is your relationship with self-efficacy? Are you an expert? Do you feel like you have a thorough knowledge and understanding of this? Are you knowledgeable, generally knowledgeable? Have you heard of it, or is this new? And to access the poll, just click on the chat and it'll say, I think it says poll, or there's some shapes or something that you click on.
Excuse me, Mr. Bruce, a couple people are wondering if they could have the sign in and access to your slides if possible.
Yeah, thanks for that. Excellent. Here's the sign in. Pop it into the chat now. Thank you. Sorry for missing that. All right, and I'm really excited. I've been really looking forward to this time. My wife's not here, so I get to try telling jokes. It's going to be great. It's been a long time coming. I've been really having fun preparing for this time. Let's look for a moment. We have 6 votes in, which tells me that we are possibly still thinking about this poll. Let's give a couple more moments. I want to just get a general read on where we're at with self-efficacy. 6 votes, and there are 15 of us in the room. I know there's a sign-in sheet as well, so we'll give a little bit of time. The poll, if you click on the little shapes under the chat, you'll see a poll in there. Yeah. There we go. Just got 2 more. I want to get at least 12. I think we can get at least 12. I know that we're also signing in and writing on the Jamboard, but I think it's important to see kind of where we're at as a group with all of this. Okay, we've got 9. Here we go. Going once. Going twice. All right, let's see what we do have. You should be able to see the results of the poll, and they're still live. So if you still need to respond, you can still put your response in. With 9 votes, looks like most of us have heard of this, but maybe are kind of still acquainting with it and learning about it. So that's good to know. We kind of generally have this understanding of the words, but not really the concepts. I want to launch another one here. Now that we've practiced with the poll, I have the second poll. This is the last one. How familiar are you with Alisaw High School teacher George Shirley? That's the second question. This little poll tool, by the way, I used this all the time when I was teaching remotely. It was really, really useful to use. We had all kinds of different applications for it. Let's see how many we've got. You should only see the results from the last one. I haven't revealed the results from the second one yet, but the second one is still open. Okay, now we have 10 votes, and I'll reveal the results of this as well. It looks like 3 of us have heard of this guy and 8 have never heard of him before. So awesome. That'll change after our time today. Excellent. So this image, I thought that this image would be a great way to start. This is perhaps a student in your class who's entering this jungle of learning for the very first time. It's a scary place. It's a wondrous place. It's mysterious. It's full of all kinds of surprises and opportunities. This person has a backpack, possibly with resources that will help them on this journey. This person ultimately must take this journey alone. This is someone who might have friends standing behind her, perhaps who took the picture. But in the end, this person is going to have to manage themselves as an individual. And I wanted to start our time today with a Russian word. And this word is uchit. And I learned about this word a number of years ago. And it stuck with me for a very important reason. And that is that we don't have a word like this in English. The word uchit in Russian means to learn and it means to teach. And I wish that we had a word like this in English. And I don't think we do. I don't, as of now, I haven't found one, unless that word might be to leech, perhaps, but then that doesn't really do the trick. But uchit is really what I wanted to use to set some direction for our time today. And I wanted to read a passage that really joins this learning and teaching phenomena together. Jennifer Fox says, there are many teaching styles as there are learning styles, and this presents exciting adventure rather than a complicated burden for teachers and parents. True teaching talent reveals itself when the teacher struggles to engage students in the process, not giving up until he finds a way to bring about understanding and competence in the student. And I want to put some focus on the word struggles because it's not easy. We work in a field that is extraordinarily difficult, in fact, notoriously difficult. We have an unprecedented teacher shortage due to burnout. We have monumental challenges, not just pedagogically speaking, but we are now competing with technology that is far more interesting and funny than we are, far more captivating than we can manage with our own human faculties. We have social and political, environmental realities that make our job extraordinarily difficult. But I'd also like to focus on the words bring about, which is it brings back this definition of the word education to the Latin educere, which means to bring out. And so what we do is to not create new knowledge or abilities in our students, but rather to facilitate their arrival and their becoming within our students and emerging into the real world. And so that's where this idea of teachers and students being the same creature in terms of our goals and what we do. I'm going to recall, for better or for worse, your knowledge of the SAT. Did anybody take the SAT exam when they were in high school? Could you click your raise hand button if you took the SAT? Do you guys remember this type of test or this question? Right, students in the classroom is to, yeah, so this is an analogy question. Personally, full disclosure, I know I'm recording this and someone's going to watch it, but I did not do very well on my SAT test when I was in high school. But this type of connection is super important, because when we think about our students, we also need to be thinking about ourselves, and vice versa. We are all members of a professional learning community. And so, yes, we're teachers on paper, but what we do for a living is we learn. And so we have to really remember that. John Hattie famously measured some of the most effective things that can be done in a school to promote student learning. And we may have seen this before. It's a study that pops up a lot. He found that the most effective thing that facilitated student learning was collective teacher efficacy. And it was off the charts. It wasn't even a comparison to other facets on his study. And that starts with self-efficacy. So we haven't even defined what self-efficacy is yet, but this powerful tool of collective teacher efficacy really can't happen without our understanding of and application of self-efficacy within our individual selves. And so that kind of brings me, I want to bring some working definitions of efficacy into our conversation here. Efficacy, generally speaking, is the belief that informs the possibility of success. So if you believe that you're going to be successful at something, you are going to put your efforts into achieving that success. If you don't have a possibility of success that's believable within you, you're not going to expend much effort in order to fulfill that potential. And so efficacy, along with collective efficacy, which is the shared belief in the potential for group success, and self-efficacy as a belief in one's own potential for success, it's all wrapped up on this belief system that we have. And I think sometimes a misconception that I come up against with self, collective, and overall efficacy is that it's a feeling. And yes, it can be a feeling, but it's so much more than that. The definition that I want to use, bringing a microscope onto self-efficacy and to really chisel some detail into this term. Self-efficacy is the belief that informs the possibility of success, but additionally, it includes one's confidence and informs their strategy about where and how to expend their potential. And I want to just give you a second to internalize that and to kind of sit with it. It includes one's confidence, which is a feeling, and informs their strategy about where and how to expend their potential. I have a case in point with a student that I had one year for summer school, and this student had failed English year after year after year. And by the time he was in my summer school class, he was not expending much effort. And you would think, gosh, you're being given a chance here to make up past units. This should be an opportunity to take. But this student's effort was extremely low. And on the surface, we might say, well, he's a lazy student, right? He's addicted to his phone. He's fill in the blank, you name it. Comes from a disenfranchised family system. Comes from a family that doesn't read. You name it, you fill in the blank. But really what this student was doing was making an informed decision that was pretty intelligent. His self-efficacy said, you're not having success at this thing. And so we're going to take our resources and we're going to put them somewhere where they're going to manifest more successfully. And that's intelligence. That's a smart student, because a student that continues to put a lot of effort into something that's not bringing back results, that's a human mind that is struggling to realize its potential. And so this student is making an intelligent decision. And that's wrapped up in the self-efficacy, right? The strategy that informs how he expends his potential. So our job is to intervene and to do the work of connecting the student to his potential. There is a kind of academic definition that comes from a researcher that has worked extensively with efficacy. He says self-efficacy is defined as individuals' beliefs. I think that word is also important to bring into this conversation, and judgments of their capabilities to manage and execute necessary courses of action. So those judgments can sometimes be implanted from teachers and parents and people of influence in a person's life that then they adopt on their own in terms of their self-image and their relationship with their potential. So I want to crack open social cognitive theory briefly. This is kind of going to scratch the surface, but social cognitive theory was developed by Albert Bandura, and he really catalyzed the work on self-efficacy and put it to work. He broke off from the behaviorists, and his theory was that learning is not just a product of behavioral conditioning from reinforcing those behaviors. It happens through observation. We learn when we see other people doing things that we want to be able to do. And so social cognitive theory says that modeling is really, really important. And we have to remember that when it comes to our own self-efficacy as teachers, because that comes across to our students in their project of cultivating their own self-efficacy. He says that learning happens regardless of formal assessment measurements. And so my student in my summer school class, even though he had failed those tests that measured his success in English, that student had been learning regardless of the fact that he had failed these classes. So learning is happening whether we like it or not. Learning occurs relative to interacting factors within social environments. And so everything that's happening around the student is influencing that student's learning. And it depends on various contextual factors. There are various parts of this puzzle that work together to manifest that learning. He said that it requires conducive social conditions rather than monstrous people to produce heinous deeds. And I really like this quote. And it reminds me of one of the most difficult students that I've ever had, Emmanuel. He was a student who would curse very loudly across my classroom. And the sinister thing about this dynamic was that he had one of his best friends in my class, and he would say horrible things to his friend out of these ironic, friendly banterings. And what was hard about him was not the behavior, but that he was really tight with the admin. So he knew our principals very well, and he wanted to go to the principal's office, and he was doing everything he could to go there, and I wouldn't let him. I kept that dynamic in my room. All of my students were exposed to it. And eventually, he was my headache. He was that famous, Rita Pearson TED talk of, the kid who he gets into your head, and he's the reason that you take a mental health day. And and he's always at school. He's never absent, always showing up. And this was Emmanuel. And so we had our personal one-to-one conversations. I'd gone through the book really as far as interventions. And finally, I decided to put Emmanuel in the driver's seat. And what I did is I gave him the responsibility to lead the entire class. And part of me was thinking, you know what, this might not be a good idea. This could turn out really bad, but I'm going to take this risk. And so I did. And what I did is I set him up to lead a class-wide discussion and gave him everything he needed. And then I stepped out of the room entirely. And I like to do this when I put my students in charge of things, because it makes them feel like there's not an adult that is surveilling them. When I walk out of my classroom, it communicates to them that they are truly in control. Now, I don't walk down the hallway or anything like that. I stay outside and I listen in. I listen through the open door of what's being said, and it usually follows a pattern. And that pattern typically is that students will talk about what the heck's going on. Where did he go? They'll say, what happened? Where is he? There might be a little side conversation, but then eventually there's this quiet that happens. And one student says, all right, well, what do you guys think about this? And then from there, it snowballs. And this is what happened with Emmanuel. And I have never had a student in my 12 years who ran a class discussion more effectively, more maturely, more gentlemanly than Emmanuel. And so this quote, going back to Bandura, it requires conducive social conditions rather than monstrous people to produce heinous deeds. Emmanuel had a light, and he felt like he needed that light to come out, and my classroom in its form and fashion was not letting that happen. And so the social context is everything when it comes to finding the light within ourselves in our classroom, but also facilitating students to discover their own light within our classrooms. There are four different aspects of Bandura's idea of self-efficacy, and in his research, he lays out that there are four factors that contribute to strong self-efficacy. Firsthand experience of success. We've all, in our own ways, in our own worlds, big and small, we have experienced success. And when we experience that success, it increases our sense of self-efficacy. Now, this can be direct experience, winning a race or getting an A on a test, or it can also be vicarious. If we have a friend, or if we are being modeled to by someone, if there's a speaker in our classroom and they've experienced success, that feeling of success within them can also translate to a personalized, internalized experience of success. It links very closely to the second factor, which is seeing people like ourselves succeed. When we see someone who comes from our walk of life and we see that they're able to do things that we want to do, that's another significant factor that builds self-efficacy in us. Receiving specific encouragement is the third. And additionally, from sources that the learner regards as credible, or also I would add influential, that's also really important. Specific means that there are particularities that can be applied to improving a behavior or an action. And so rather than good job, right, I want to know what exactly was it that was good? What does good mean? Was I able to be specific here? Which word was it that was specific, right? That kind of feedback is going to be much more beneficial to my self-efficacy than general encouragement at large. And then finally, managing negative emotions. This is a really hard one, and one that I want to give some attention to a little bit later in the program. When we can take a negative situation, negative feelings, difficult circumstances, and we can apply tools to overcoming those challenges, those obstacles, that ability to manage them is also really important in developing strong self-efficacy. So as far as contextual factors, Bandura lays out that there's what he calls triadic reciprocality. And there are three parts of it. First is the person, and that's the self-efficacy itself, of a learner's perceptions of themselves, their sense of confidence, their sense of worth, their sense of ability. And that's not just students. That means us, teachers, as well. We can't forget that we're talking about students, but we're also talking about ourselves as people. This is the first contextual factor. The second is behavior, and this is social and academic. This is Emmanuel shouting the F word across my room, but it's also him choosing to sit down and to write a response to a prompt. So it's both academic and social. And then the environment, and that's everything else essentially that surrounds the learner. So the classroom setting, social climate. If we're looking at your student right now and your student is the person, then you, the teacher, are the environment. If you within your PLC are the person here, then your colleagues are your environment. So just something to kind of keep in mind as we break this down. Each of these affects the other. All three of these are working constantly, 24/7. Well, hopefully not 20. No one here in this room teaches 24/7, I hope, but 8/5. This is happening. This is the machine as it works. And when we can be mindful of all three of these working together and we balance them out and we pay our close attention to each of these, we should see effective learning. So I wanted to just kind of break down some examples of how these interact. So when a person influences behavior, what we're talking about is the choices that person makes as it relates to their perceptions of self, and the behavior that they choose to manifest from that personal vantage. On the flip side, when behavior affects the person, we're talking about results that inform progress or ability or success, that then make a person react in a certain way. The environment works on behavior with the routines and norms and expectations that we establish within that environment. For example, if we put a do now in front of the classroom, that environmental element is going to cause a behavior in our students, um, sitting down, writing, what have you. And then on the flip side, behavior affects the environment when students, for example, don't understand a concept, or if there's a behavior that requires modifications to the classroom, to the setting, et cetera. That's when behavior affects environment. And then environment is also the product of personal perceptions, social perceptions, regard for that environment. So stigmas related to learning disabilities, for example, English learners, and their ability to speak, stereotypes, all of that stuff that we try to teach our students about the consequences of, all of that plays into the personal effect on the environment. Imagine being that one student in the room who is on an IEP in a classroom of students who are in your mind beyond where you are. That reality is going to have an impact on your self-efficacy. And then environment affects the person, peer or teacher feedback, having a sense of safety or purpose and purpose within the environment. If you feel welcomed in that place, and if you feel like the place is one that's productive, that will also encourage the personal aspect of this mapping. So to give some specific examples, feeling confident will influence a learner's willingness to take risks. If you're not confident, you're not going to take risks. And so that's kind of a more concrete example of how self-efficacy can influence behavior. Turning an assignment in on time, if you can do that, it might reinforce your sense of responsibility. It'll increase your self-efficacy knowing that you were able to do that. Mutual respect, we kind of talked about some of these, and in the slides you can go back and see some more specific examples. But ultimately, going back to this engine, the reason I wanted to highlight the word person in yellow here is because that's the self-efficacious center of all of this. And self-efficacy is a really important driver of this machine. You can't start a classroom with just focus on anything outside of the student. If you make an alteration to the environment, for example, you need to be thinking about a student's efficacy of himself while you make that decision. So some important research has been done. I'm going to kind of keep the numbers out of here, but some important conclusions that have been drawn about self-efficacy from some research studies include highly self-efficacious teachers persist longer, provide a greater academic focus in the classroom, and exhibit different types of feedback than teachers who have lower expectations concerning their ability to influence student learning. So when teachers have strong self-efficacy, they will stick to their work and they'll diversify their work. Another strong takeaway in the research of self-efficacy says that attitudes and self-efficacy predict, and I think that's a hugely important tool here, that it predicts teachers' intention to use inclusive strategies. So when you think about Dweck's growth mindset, for example, self-efficacy is essentially, or growth mindset rather, essentially is folded into self-efficacy. We can see inclusivity of all types of learners when a teacher is self-efficacious. And finally, teachers with low self-efficacy tend to show higher stress that is associated with their profession. And it's also closely related to job satisfaction and teacher burnout. And so if you have, or someone you know has felt extremely stressed under the pressures of the job and feel kind of like they're burning out, self-efficacy is really the place to turn and to focus on some of the important work in growing that self-efficacy. So I wanted you to share your thinking in a brief response to our Jamboard. Hopefully the Jamboard makes sense and that all worked. And I hope that you guys are reading each other's ideas and use other tools too. You can use, other than the sticky notes, there's a pen. You can draw shapes. Looks like you can draw triangles, and I don't know. You can do whatever you want. Just in response to this prompt, I want you to think about your worst possible day of teaching. It's not often that we give the time to sit down and to actually think about such horrible, horrible days. Think about your worst possible day and what do you do to regulate your negative emotions?
I noticed that Jennifer has her hand raised too.
Yeah, Jennifer, go for it.
That was a mistake. I'm going to lower my hand.
Oh,
Sorry.
Jennifer, you have so much to say. You have so much to offer. I know you do.
I am enjoying the session.
Oh, cool.
It's good
Oh,
stuff.
good.
So
Yeah,
thank you.
absolutely. If you haven't had, I'm trying to think as you guys are like writing and stuff and posting your ideas, I'm trying to think if you've never had a worst possible day of teaching. I think that is amazing. And I also feel, I don't know, I feel like you need to have a worst day. I kind of feel like that just has to happen. Maybe it'll come. Maybe it'll come.
I feel like when we're most desperate as teachers, that's when we learn the hardest. We're like, okay, I'm going to figure this out. I've had so many bad days.
Hey, McLean, your microphone is kind of bumping in and out. It's like I don't know if anyone else is hearing that, but there's kind of a. Yeah, it's like a. Are you using an external mic maybe? We can still hear you though, so that's okay. We'll just use our imaginations. We'll pretend like you're in some kind of cool spaceship or something. So yeah, again, take some time, think about, if it's not coming to you right away, that's totally fine. It'll come. But that we do so much context shifting in our daily lives. We're talking one-on-one to a student, and then we're talking one-on group to students, and then we're talking one-on class to students, and then the administrator comes in and we're having a one-on-one with another adult. And then, I mean, we're constantly shifting in the way that we communicate with one another, and that is exhausting in itself. Code shifting and moving around in our daily lives. It's extremely taxing work just on that level. So if you haven't had a worse day, I would love to attend your session, by the way. Let's get in touch because I want to go to your, I want to know what your trick is. Not that the worst days happen a lot or much at all, but I don't know. I think they're kind of important. It should be a required thing. Have a worst day. One of the things that I think can be overlooked is that students, we have these tools within us that we use to get over negative emotion or stress. And it's easy to assume that students have such tools as well. But a lot of times when we see behaviors in our classrooms of students who appear on the surface to be lazy or appear on the surface to be disobedient or disrespectful or you name it, what's really going on is that there's a deficit in the tools within them to manage their stress, manage their the challenges that they're experiencing in their lives. So this is a hugely important area to be focusing our teaching, regardless of content area. All right, looks like let's see what we have. When I'm alone, I cry. That's awesome. I really respect that. My wife is a crier. She knows how to release it. In the classroom, I find a space to breathe deeply. Thanks for sharing that. I've literally walked out of my room on my worst day of teaching. I needed to regulate without being watched. Cry and go on a walk. Have a coworker observe the situation and give feedback. Box breathing. box breathing. What's box breathing? Huh.
It's when you imagine a box and you close your eyes and breathe with the box. I'll type it here.
Yeah, thanks. So we're seeing all kinds of different strategies. Some people kind of manage within themselves. Others reach out to others. I see here, I usually go to my buddy teacher to get advice. So reaching out and having the humility to say, I need help. It's not always easy to express that, to say, I am defeated. I am down. But there's no weakness in that. There is none. So it's really valuable, I think, to see the internalization and the externalization of our regulation of these emotions. I would also encourage you to work with your students, perhaps before a unit of study, or even in the midst of that unit of study, to work with them on how they plan to manage the possible stresses that come with their learning. Because learning requires a certain amount of stress. We need to push ourselves in order to advance, and so that ultimately brings challenge that we have to work with. So thank you for sharing your ideas and thoughts about this, and I hope that you guys are reading each other's posts as well, and that some new ideas come about. I wanted to share with you on this note of negative emotion and self-efficacy. What you're looking at on your screen right now is a little research experimentation that I conducted on a class remotely when we were online. And I wanted to share with you some of the results. Now, this is only one study, and so it's anecdotal at this point. But what I did is I broke my students into groups, and I am an English teacher. And so I was teaching AP English. And in groups each day for 25 minutes, I put my students into breakout groups to read 1/3 of a text, to annotate, and then write a body paragraph, just one body paragraph. And after each breakout, students rated the quality of their collaborative time. So they had to decide, was this positive collaborative time? Was this a waste of collaborative time, neutral, et cetera? And then students wrote their body paragraph, and then I assessed their paragraph using criterion B. It's a particular criterion set. And so on the first day, these circles down at the bottom represent the efficacy feedback that I got from my students. So on the first day, the red represents students who said that the collaborative time was quiet. And I wanted to simplify their feedback. I didn't want to get too specific. On the first day, it was either quiet, collaborative and quiet, or quiet and productive. I'm sorry, quiet and productive, quiet, or collaborative and talkative. So that means they were getting on the mic and they were participating. And as you can see, a majority of the students were on task, not necessarily collaborating with one another. So they got into breakout rooms and then they did their own thing. 3 of them said quiet, which also suggests that it could have been unproductive time. And then we did the paragraph, they wrote it, they submitted it. On the second day, the students, I gave them the same exercise. I wanted them to rate their collaborative time, how they felt about that time, but I increased the criteria. So it went from very positive to neutral to somewhat positive to negative. And all of a sudden, it's interesting because we start to see some differentiation between their choices. 5 of them had positive experiences, 6 of them not as much. But the negativity is there as well, right? That there's negative experience. We're not sure what that means because it's too general, but we could define that if we were to follow up. But then on the third day, the positivity increased. And I thought this was neat because going from 6 neutral to 6 positive, something happened. And I don't know what that is because I wasn't in every breakout room every time. But the thing that I thought was really cool was that when I assessed their work using this criterion for their body paragraphs, as their group efficacy increased, I saw academic steps forward in their work as well. And I saw a 0.56 improvement over those 3 days as they were also reflecting on efficacy within their groups. And so again, this is one snapshot that I would like to do more work in and to measure how much efficacy is correlated to the academic achievement, but it's something that I find really interesting. I'm looking at the chat. Were group members consistent? No, they were not. They were different groups each day. And so that could have very well been a factor as well. Yeah. But this one snapshot I think is important for thinking about the transfer of how we feel about ourselves in the work that we're doing, along with the community that we're learning with, and the output that we produce. And so that's just kind of a beginning point. And I encourage you in your classrooms to do kind of mini experiments on your students as they work, and kind of try to integrate your standards as you're teaching them, our state standards that are mandated, along with measurements in self-efficacy. And I also have a tool linked in this presentation for you to be able to measure standards that are linked to self-efficacy. We don't mandate things like efficacy in our state standards, and so to be able to measure efficacy is, I think, really valuable. So another Jamboard post I want to ask you, moving forward. First of all, before we do that, actually, are there any thoughts about this or any reflections, anything that anyone would like to say? This is definitely an incomplete study. It's one that I plan to do more work with and extend outward with, but just want to make sure. Or in general, would anyone like to hop on the mic, ask any questions? All right. If you do, don't hesitate to click that raise hand button. In the Jamboard, on the next page, on the third page, I'd like you to describe a successful teacher at your school. So this might be that teacher that you went to when you were feeling defeated. But what at your site, what does a successful teacher look like? Try to describe them by defining what makes them successful. Is it because they were voted the Monterey County Teacher of the Year? Is it because all the students like them? Is it because everyone's always talking about them in the staff lounge? What is it that defines this success in this person? You don't have to use names either. You don't have to say, Miss Kim is a successful teacher because, no, just leave the names out. I'm just looking at random names. Hi, Jeannie. I just used your name. So I've seen some ideas here on the board. I'm seeing they will dance in front of the whole school at an assembly, calls herself the best teacher. So calling yourself the best teacher is pretty confident. So being outward, being bold, confident, quick to understand, relate, and offer help to others. Being calm, positive, focused, caring, hardworking, collaborative. I've seen students who misbehave in all classes behave in one particular class. This teacher's classroom cultivated peace and creativity. Wonderful things to cultivate. They are confident in what they do, but they are willing to make a lot of mistakes. And that's so important, making mistakes in front of students and owning those mistakes, and also working through those mistakes publicly in a way that students are welcomed into your process to see how you get yourself out of a tangle so that they can mimic that and begin to own that on their own. They treat their students like they're destined for living a great life. It's okay to meet students where they're at and making them grow. So these are all awesome. It sounds like we have some great people around us to help model for us our own becoming as teachers, our own self-improvements as people, as professionals. And that's what I want to use to kind of segue into this guy. So I was at Alisal High School doing summer school this year, and one of the activities I had students do was to give me a tour of the school. They were my tour guides, and I was the tourist. And they had to use some language strategies to portray their school to me in a way that expressed the pride they had for their school. So ethos, logos, pathos, et cetera, ELA stuff. And as they were doing their research, we stumbled upon this guy, George Shirley. He taught at Alisal High School in 1986. He was a senior government teacher, and his story captivated me. And I'd like to share that story with you. It's important in terms of self-efficacy, and this is kind of taking the environment to the person. This is how a teacher can really supercharge students with self-efficacy. But I also want to give you time to read, because I know that professional reading is not necessarily always something that we do in our free time. So I'd like you to go to perusal.com and click the ad, or type in the ad code Bruce KTVKX. And I like this platform because it has anyone used this, by the way? Can you click your raise hand button if you have used Perusal before? All right, looks like this might be new for us. So if you have any questions getting into it, let me know and I can help you out. But essentially what it is it's an interactive annotation software application. And I want to link you as well to the actual article. So you're going to have a version of the text that's in Perusal that's interactive. But then also, this is the article here on Voices of Monterey Bay. It's a local journalist organization. And this article is all available there. I'll give you some time to get into it first. Can you just let me know in the chat? Just say I'm in, like that, if you're in Perusal. And then when I see that you guys are in, we'll move on.
Do I need to create an account, like sign in with Google?
Yeah, so you should be able to link your Salinas SUHSD account to Perusal and sign up that way. And then you should be able to click on an article titled "A Bright and Shining Year at Alisal High." Emily, did it ask you to add a code? Can you explain how you used the code? Because I'm only seeing it from my angle.
So I went to perusal.com and then I signed in and it says, do you want to join a study group? And where it says join study group, I typed in Bruce KTV KX. Can you hear me okay? Yeah, join study group.
Yeah, and your mic is like really, really loud. And I might have to turn down a bit. So, but thank you. You're definitely blasted off at this point. You're in full cruising altitude. Awesome. It looks like Tiana's in, Juan is in, Emily's in. Hey, Mr. Ledesma. Glad to see you.
Hey, how's it going?
Good, good, good. Awesome. Is anyone else from Alisal High School?
Sort of. I was there until last year. And then I transferred to Salinas High.
Awesome. Very cool. That amphitheater, that was the first time I'd seen that amphitheater. I love that space. It's a really cool campus.
John, can you tell us once we're in what we are looking, I put the code in, but what we're looking to do after that, how to find the article?
Yeah, so there should be an article titled "A Bright and Shining Year at Alisal High," and if you click on that, I'm sorry.
Mine says get started. Do I have to click on that or am I the wrong?
Click on Get Started. So far in the text, I see Matthew, I see Jeannie, I see Emily, I see Marilyn, I see Chloe. Yeah, and if you click Get Started, you should be able to get into that article. And okay, awesome. Looks like we're kind of getting in, and this is all new stuff, so we always have to budget time for new tech steps. But this is an article that I'd like to read as follows. So before you get into it too much, I am going to put you into small groups. However, you can structure your reading and annotation time however you'd like. So if you would prefer kind of just reading and annotating this independently, by all means, that's totally fine. If you prefer reading out loud together and then annotating independently, you can do that if you'd like. Sometimes it's nice to have other people that we can read aloud with to break up the reading, or a mixed approach. If you want to do some of it reading out loud and some of it independently, that's totally up to you. I want to give you a point person to help get the whole group on the same page so that the people who are reading out loud can understand who's reading out loud, and then those who are working independently are understood to be working independently. And so I'm going to create rooms in just a moment, and just whip around real quick. We're all teachers here, so you guys are pros at this. So just kind of whip around and say what's up to each other and where you're from, and then kind of decide on how you want to break this down. I'm going to give you 35 minutes for this, and I read this on my own, kind of like I would say patiently. I kind of took my time, and it took me about 22 minutes. And so I wanted to give that padding for really sinking our teeth into this. As you read this article, I think you'll like it. I hope you like it. I hope that you benefit from the conversation about efficacy and what George Shirley did at Alisal High School. But as you read, highlight the text within perusal, and you can leave annotations. And I'll show you an example myself in just a moment in the text. But also engage other people's annotations. You can click on a highlight and then respond, and you'll see that you can open up a chat discussion. And in the district, we have our P's. Pick your P. Are you going to put some ideas on the table? Are you going to presume positive intentions? Pick your P as you engage this reading. Questions to consider. You guys are thinkers. You're professional thinkers, and so you may have your own sights set. However, if you're feeling like you'd like some questions to consider, I provided a list for you here. To just kind of get you thinking in terms of self-efficacy and what this article can reveal to us about it. Other than that, does anyone have any questions for me or anything that I can do a better job of explaining? Hopefully you haven't started reading too much yet. Can you click your raise hand button if you're feeling good and you're ready to get into our groups? All right, awesome. Thanks, you guys. So point people, I'm just going to give you a point person so that you can avoid having that conversation. So Alexis, if you could be the point person in your group. Jeannie, if you can be the point person in your group. Juan, if you could be the point person in your group. And then Marilyn, if you could be the point person in your group, that would be awesome. Just make sure that everyone understands how each person's gonna read this in the group, right? I'm gonna open rooms, and I'll stay here as well if you have any questions or any technical concerns that pop up. All right. I'll also be here with the timer, so 35 minutes. Plan on about 35 minutes from now coming back together, and we'll take it from there. Okay. Let's see who the ghosts are. Oh, no ghosts. Sarah. Cool background, Sarah. I hope that was enough time. If you're still kind of reading or thinking through some of this, there are a couple of minutes left that I've allotted for just reading. So feel free to.
We were still kind of chatting. Tiana got cut off. So I don't
Oh,
know.
shoot. Oh no, sorry about that. Well, that was actually what I wanted to kind of do, is to just open it up. So the mic is kind of open. I was hoping that we could just share some takeaways, and I didn't see anyone using the feature in Perusal, but if you highlight the text, you can also create discussion threads within the text itself. So from the mic and Perusal, I'd like to just open it up and to encourage you to share some of your takeaways in this reading.
Tiana, did you want to finish?
Yeah, I can talk. Yeah. I was just talking about, because we were talking about the like collective efficacy. And I just note, like, I wanted to talk about in the reading, anytime that one of the students got accepted to a college, that Shirley actually like marched down and made an announcement over the PA and made a really big deal about it. And I really appreciated that, because seeing one student accomplishes, has some accomplishment, the other students are gonna be like, well, if they can do it, so can I. So it just kind of helps raise everyone up. So I really appreciated that.
Yeah, it touched on what was it? Like, you have to succeed, or you have to vicariously live through someone else's success. And I think that's a huge thing. Especially since Alisal is still kind of a very similar demographic to what it was in 1986. Yeah.
Yeah, and that there are these stigmas and stereotypes that surround our communities, and where they come from and why they're allowed to perpetuate is really a question to ask. Princeton, for example, should not be out of the reach of Alisal students, or any of our high school, middle schools students at all. So does anyone else have ideas that stood out to them in this reading, or perhaps something that surprised you about George Shirley's tenure at Alisal?
Hi, this is Jenny. I had never heard of him before. I've worked for the district for 18 years, and I thought it was a very powerful story. Whether he did everything perfect or not, I thought we could learn something from it. And I kind of resonated with my own educational path, that I must have had self-efficacy, because I wasn't the typical student that should have gone to college, but I always just thought I was going to college because that's how it was in my family. And so I think that can be really powerful. And as a community and as educators, I think we can learn a lot from that. As I always say, I remember a book my mom brought home from the library when I was in high school. It says, if you don't apply to Harvard, you're not going to get into Harvard. So I think that can hold true. And I think for a lot of our students, their world is really small. And so it maybe opened up the possibility, the seeds were planted.
And that success is the best case scenario in applying to Harvard, but also what can be perceived as failure is also a success for the self-efficacious student, that when they receive that rejection letter from Harvard, they paste it on the wall and they turn it into a meditation, a reflection, a lesson to be learned that they can put in their bank of life experience to bring up later in their lives and to draw upon. That failure should be an opportunity. And the self-efficacious student is one to recognize that. So now failures big and small should be absolutely celebrated. Yeah, thanks for sharing that. Open mic. I'm just going to kind of mute up here. And if anyone's kind of thinking, that's cool too. I would kind of also be interested in hearing what your thoughts are about Alisal at the time, as far as collective efficacy. Did we see any possible cracks in the collective efficacy of Alisal at the time? And then even George Shirley as well. I think one of the things that stood out to me about him is that he is a kind of rogue teacher who is extremely confident, but he also has his own holes. There are these kind of shortcomings in his approach to the students as well. I was wondering if anyone might comment on some of that.
Well, so what I noticed about George was he seemed very committed to his ideas of tossing out the book and using the Constitution. And perhaps that came from his legal background. But that kind of confidence probably exuded down into the students, or trickled down into the students rather. And, you were talking about the collective efficacy of Alisol back then. I shared this with my small group, but I guess I'll just share it now because I'm not there anymore. I actually had experiences with the admin where we would have like a group meeting regarding a student. And I've actually had admin that is currently still there tell the students to their faces, that they were not going to be anything more than field workers. So they just needed to kind of shut up and keep their heads down for the rest of the year. And that really put me at odds with the admin because one of the things that bothered me is that one of the things I noticed is that collective efficacy of 1986 is still somewhat persistent and still present in the admin, especially if the admin that told me that is still there, which I believe he is. So, it's the admin's collective efficacy, I would say, and I'm specifically speaking to admin, not the teachers, because I know Alisol has some amazing teachers. Bizarro is still there. He's fantastic. There's definitely excellent math teachers. There's definitely English teachers. So we definitely still have really good teachers there. But I think it's extremely disturbing when the admin has such low faith in their students, or to use these terms, like their thoughts of the students' collective efficacy in particular social groups is low. So it was kind of, I don't know, I was kind of amused. Sorry if you guys hear my dogs barking. I was kind of, I don't know, I don't want to say amused because I wasn't laughing about it, but I was like, oh, this idea has persisted all the way back since 1986, and it still is there. And it might not still have been there. It might not be consistent, but I noticed that in the admin, which is part of the reason why I left, because I can't imagine being a kid hearing from an adult who is supposed to support you that really your only role in life is to be a field worker. And clearly this is why you're acting out and that kind of thing. And so that's where I'm at.
Yeah, it's tricky, right? We hear stories about kids that are, ironically, very much motivated by hearing that, and who kick into full gear when someone says something like that to them, because they go, wait a minute, no, I'm not that. And then they kind of shift around. It's hard to prescribe these universal approaches to students when they're so diverse. And so I wonder about that, if sometimes what we say to students that might be our version of life as we know it, this is a reality, here's what's going to happen, here's your spatula, and get ready to use it in your professional career in the future, that might be extremely motivating for some students, but also very demoralizing and be harmful to self-efficacy in students. We need to know who our students are, which needs to be worked into the curriculum as well. The students need to appear in the curriculum, and that can be really efficacious. Yeah. Did anybody have any thoughts about perhaps the implications for how efficacy provides this foundational context for learning when we want our students to go above and beyond to be the best versions of themselves that they can be? Does anyone have any ideas about how this project of building a student's self-efficacy, building our own self-efficacy, because we can't forget that we're right alongside our students, and if we are not working on ourselves and our ability to believe in our potential for success, how can this work? How can this help us in our both our curricular reality our instructional reality, but then also the fact that we are a microcosm of society at large. What role does efficacy play in this? By this, I mean George Shirley's project that I think is probably all of our project to get our kids out there into a professional academic prosperity. Or
I'm
other
sorry,
ideas as well.
I wanted to mention, well, I wanted to kind of address what you said before you asked that last question. The part where you said, oh, hand the kid the spatula and tell him to get to work because that's all he's good for, can be a powerful motivator. I get what you're saying, but I just want to challenge that statement a little bit, because I think that while some students would overcome that obstacle, no matter who the student is, no matter how driven they are, it is still an obstacle. It's not a motivator, it's an obstacle. And so telling the kid, hey, I don't think you can get the A, may have some reverse psychological effect, but I actually think that's just more negative reinforcement. And so no matter who the kid is, the positive reinforcement is always going to be more effective than the negative reinforcement. So I just wanted to comment on that. Thank you.
Can you re-ask the other question, Mr. Bruce?
Yeah. I'm just wondering about how, essentially it's that fourth bullet. What are some of the implications for how efficacy provides a foundation for our students to go above and beyond what they think they're able to do? Yeah, Tiana, I see the hand. Go for it.
I was just going to say, just something as simple as believing that the students can accomplish something, even if they don't believe they can, is enough to can be enough to motivate them further. So if they are like, oh no, I'm not going to go to college, I don't think I can, you're like, no, I totally think you can, like, apply. Even if like they didn't believe they would get in and they applied, they could still get in. So just having that kind of like motivation for them, being the cheerleader for them, can really help them go beyond what they think they can do.
For me, based on my experience, I kept on reminding my students that just like them, I had difficulty with math as well, but it didn't stop me from pushing myself to learn mathematics. And in the end, I end up teaching math, and I'm supporting my students with learning disability. And that's what kept me from reminding them that they could be successful as well. Although there would be mostly days that they would hate doing the work. And after several years of pushing them, they end up getting their diploma. And I feel good that they would tell me, thanking me for pushing them, and eventually they have earned their diploma.
Yeah, and every diploma earned is another model of success for the community to come together around and celebrate, and to see that I can do that. I can do that too.
Yeah, wherever our issues of equity arise, the power of the mind just to do things is much greater than we think it will be. This, and that's, I think, what was taught is just that these students really believed that they could do anything, and when you believe that, anything's possible, because it was interesting that a lot of them that did so well sort of left their comfort zone. They left all their conditioning, their family, everything they knew to go to a completely different place where they had no one to rely on but themselves. And so they, in a sense, it was a time to completely reform their ideas of themselves and challenge themselves and break free. You know, it's kind of like that old. I mean, I've noticed in just like math classes that, you know, every time a student doesn't succeed in a math class, say, okay, well, you have to repeat it and then you'll get it better the next time. And the weird thing is that they almost always do worse. Even the next year, they do the same algebra one again for the second year. And I mean, a lot of times it's the pattern that they do worse, because it's not that they can't do it. It's just they believe they can't do it. And so they just rise to whatever level of expectation they had of themselves. So, yeah.
And I think a lot of times this work in growing self-efficacy and cultivating it, helping it to grow within our students, it gets lost in the content. And we teach our content for various reasons. We choose to be history or math or science or English teachers, Spanish teachers, what have you, for our own reasons. But the content is kind of our access point into couching this self-efficacy, protecting this self-efficacy within the various opportunities our content provides. As an English teacher, reading stories about other people's lives and looking at characters in literature and assessing the efficacy of characters within literature and kind of analyzing what happens with characters who kind of take those risks and push those boundaries, and what happens to characters that perhaps struggle with this efficacy, and then bringing it back to the student and then comparing yourself to these characters and where do you stand, where does your efficacy come from, what's its source, etc., is a way to kind of get the content to leverage the personal work. So hopefully we can kind of in our own ways commit to that outcome, that our content is not here to just create a bunch of knowledge vessels, but to also create human beings that we want to see in the world and that we want to be our neighbors one day in our neighborhoods. And we want to see them running for office and doing all these things around us in our social lives. Does anyone else have thoughts or ideas to share? George Shirley, I really just thank my students at Alisal High for exposing me to this story. I thought it was really neat and a perfect example of self-efficacy at work within a school.
Yeah, by the sounds of it, he only lasted 1 year as a teacher, right? But he had such a huge impact in that 1 year.
I'm curious about that too. It seems like he was, fired, of course, because of mismanagement of $6,000, but he also was kind of pointing fingers and kind of placing blame elsewhere. And I wonder what would have happened if he presumed positive intentions, essentially, and kind of, thought that, hey, my administration, this whole classroom to field pipeline thing, it's the unfortunate reality, but there's not one person or agency to blame here. This is, we're trying to do something positive. And if he had a different mindset, I wonder how this story would have been, how it would have been different. I don't know if anyone has thoughts about that, but collective efficacy was definitely not something on George Shirley's radar, at least not according to the article, at least that I could see. Marilyn, it is available outside of Perusal, and yeah, I don't see many annotations in Perusal, and that's okay. The tool is kind of neat. If you highlight, in fact, how about we all do that? Everybody leave one annotation, just even if you just want to highlight and say hello. I want you all to just kind of see what this can do. Maybe you like it, maybe you don't, but if you highlight the text, you can see that a little chat bar opens up, and you can have discussions. I like this for for close readings and things like that. Again, I'm an English teacher, so I use that. But it's a good tool for students who are quick to text, but not as quick to speak. I think we all kind of deal with that in our own way. Yeah, Alexis.
I was just curious. So I actually didn't annotate because it was I realized it was like a group thing, and I was like, oh, I don't want to mess up. I didn't want to do it because I didn't want to hinder or mess up anyone else's. So my question was, this is intentionally meant to be a group annotation amongst your small groups with the kids, I think, or how do you use this tool? Just because I feel like each individual, especially within our classes, has a different reading level. At least I teach biology science, so I get a lot of different kiddos. But it's an intentional group annotation tool.
Yeah, it's collaborative in the sense that everyone's on the same document. That's the collaborative piece. Is what's kind of cool that I've seen in the past is that there'll be little discussions that'll start on one area. So someone will highlight a piece of the text and say, hey, it's here. I've left a couple of different annotations you could click on in the text, but one idea starts to sort of grow, and then other students will feed back on that idea, and you can start a little discussion on just that one little piece of the text. Sometimes it's even just a sentence, and it kind of is a nice way to facilitate conversations at the same time in one doc. So, but it's also a little clunky, I would say, and so it takes a little bit of practice to use. And I think that it could have been set up better on my part, but I just wanted to expose you to this story. And I'd also like to push forward. Yeah, Tiana, I see your hand.
I wanted to ask, because this is my first time using Perusal, and it looks really interesting. Is there a way to have it set individually so people make their own annotations, and at the end you can put it all together and see if people had similar things that they annotated? Or
yeah, you can create little customizable groups, and you can have different groups annotate and then pull it all together. I'm not sure if you can put it all into one doc. I'm still kind of learning about that, but I know that you can break it down.
Okay.
Forms and
Awesome.
factions. Yeah. So we have about 15 minutes left, and I'd like to invite you guys to share one last contribution to our jam. And on the fourth page, there's a slide that says your commitment to strengthening your self-efficacy within your PLC, and your commitment to strengthening your students' self-efficacy within your learning environment at your classroom. And while you're thinking about that, I can relink the jam to our chat just to make it quickly accessible. While you guys are kind of sharing an idea there, I wanted to kind of place these tools in your cart. These are activities that may promote self-efficacy in our learners. And so we've kind of talked about positive affirmation and encouragement, believing in other learners, their abilities, their potentials, exposure to other people's strong sense of self-efficacy, ethnic studies, underscore on that one. Students who see that they belong to a diverse group of people, and a diverse array of successes and contexts. When students can plug in to history through their own ethnic experience, very much beneficial to self-efficacy. Cognitive modeling, I'll let you kind of read some of this, but I did link some resources. So personality typing activities, and using those personality typings to facilitate larger activities and projects, discussions, what have you, around the self. It's good to have something like an assessment that provides context so that students don't feel like they're just talking about themselves, because that can be very vulnerable and kind of private. But when students can prescribe to a type and know that that type is just sort of an avatar, if you will, kind of a token, they're not necessarily, they don't have enough skin in the game to feel like they're they're personally involved. There's a little bit of separation. So both with personality and with identity and passion mapping. So Ikigai is a context for personal worth and meaning. And then of course, career tests are really great as well. working on how to manifest strengths. So amplifying and bringing out the strengths, but then also bringing out the challenges. You know, we don't want to avoid challenge. We don't want them to feel like challenge is something that we need to avoid or run away from. We need to jump right into it. But how? What's your style? What's your method for managing challenges? How do you do it based on who you are and what you know? Because all of these diverse methods of addressing challenge can be really powerful, especially when we do it together in groups. We kind of saw that on our slide earlier with how we manage a horrible day at work. So we benefit from that. As well, I have a couple more links, particularly when it comes to value and learning from failure. I linked a lesson for you there about failures, right? Potato chips, microwaves, Play-Doh, all of these inventions were mistakes. And so framing failure as an opportunity and as something that's positive could be really beneficial to self-efficacy in our learning. Personal goal setting, metacognitive and reflective tasks before, during, and after projects, learning sequences, reflections on personal challenges and successes, publicly visible posters that remind students of their ability. I wanted to just show these. These are two posters. I took these photographs. The one on the left is at Rancho and the one on the right is at Alisal. We have these kinds of posters around our campus and they're great, but we also need to teach them. So one thing that I've done, this poster on the left, I really like it because what I'll do if there's a student of mine who's not showing the effort or who's not participating or who's having trouble completing assignments, what have you, we have a conversation and we work our way down this chart, and I just kind of prompt them and I say, you know, is it that you can't do this? Well, it's not that I can't do it. I can do it. Okay, so let's move down. You're at 20%. So if it's not that you can't do it, then is it that you don't know how to do it? Well, I know how to do it. Okay, let's move to 30. Do you wish you could do it? Yeah, I wish I could do it. Okay, do you want to do it? And so working with them and working our way down and then stopping, right? I think I might. Oh, I don't think I might. I have practice tomorrow, right? And then pause. Okay, we're at 50%. Let's address this where you are then. And let's problem solve together. Let me help you until you have the skills to address this on your own. And then on the right, I saw this one at Alisal, 10 things that require zero talent. So having these conversations and measuring these, having students kind of measure their own abilities in these different important habits, if you will, bring it to them. What's the evidence that you are prepared? Are you able to do these things consistently? Are you coming to class with an attitude that is consistent? Are you coming in with a negative attitude every day? Well, what might be causing that negative attitude, et cetera? These are great things that are on our campuses that we can also fold into the classroom, and it can help to really promote self-efficacy in our students. Another thing that I linked to you guys is teaching tolerance. They have standards for social justice, and this is not a hippie curriculum. It's not a curriculum that's kind of based on feelings and less concrete kind of skills. This is a curriculum that applies to people of all political, philosophical, religious persuasions. It's a fantastic supplement to, and I would even say something to work in tandem with your state teaching standards, the curricular standards. So I linked you to those. They're really wonderful and very applicable in our classes. For the sake of time, I won't open it up, but I linked it to you in the slides. And so these are great. I was hoping that we could kind of share an activity to promote self-efficacy and to create a library here. But I'm now kind of realizing that might be redundant because you've already made your commitments. And so maybe what I'll do is I can kind of copy and paste what you put in the Jamboard, and I will add those to your slide here so that you guys can walk away with some of your own tools as well. Looking at the Jamboard, I can see focus on what students can do rather than what they can't do. I think that's a really great one. And always keep that goal in mind, that they can get there and it takes steps to get there, but you can't start with what's outside of that process. Discussion on learning versus grades. 60% on test means you need 20% or more for a B. You're almost there. So recognizing where we're at, we cannot inflate grades. It's our job to have accurate measurements of what students can do, but to take them where they're at and to really honor them as human beings in that 60%, that there is value in that 60%, and that they can increase and grow from wherever they are. Thanks for sharing that. I'm also seeing focusing on reflection and allowing students to redo and retake assignments and tests. Praise students who improve, even if it's only by a point. Absolutely. And also hold them accountable for it, that there are retakes, there are redos, and there are also expectations, and there are also certain responsibilities that come with this ability to redo and retake, and holding the students to that. So I will take these and bring them into our slide here. It looks like we're still kind of bringing some ideas to the jam. I'm seeing in the chat that we need a link to the slides again. Absolutely. Let me bring it in for you here. There we go. So those are the slides. We're coming to the end of our time, and I would just like to know if anyone has any thoughts, questions, anything that maybe we haven't addressed that you wanted to probe. And if not, that's totally okay too. I would just like to remind you that self-efficacy is more than a feeling. And I was going to put a Boston song on here, More Than a Feeling, but then I started reading the lyrics. I was like, no, that's too weird. That doesn't have anything to do with self-efficacy. But it's more than a feeling. It's not just a feeling of confidence. It's also essential to understand that one's self-efficacy is calculated, and it informs the strategic output of our efforts. And so this is not just a feeling of confidence. This is an intelligence, and it guides our behaviors. It informs our behaviors. So really kind of getting to the bottom of how behaviors are manifesting and revealing themselves comes back to the question of what is the self-efficacy informing the behaviors to do, what's really at the core of these behaviors, whether academic or social. Going back to the beginning, so what have you been doing that fuels you? I hope that you can take that fuel. That's really important to apply to your craft, your art, as I regard it. Teaching, it's an art, and it really needs fuel. And so you've been spending time, hopefully, kind of resetting, regrouping for another school year around the corner, and bringing that to your classroom in a way that makes you a more self-efficacious teacher is something I really just want to leave you with, and to also be mindful that our students are also doing things that fuel them in their own ways, and that I hope that we can fold that into our teaching as well, in creating self-efficacious students. Summer's not over yet, though. These are 3 books that I would just like to put on your radar. These are really good books that I like, particularly on the right, Teach Like Yourself, How Authentic Teaching Transforms Our Students and Ourselves. This is a great book that really reminds the reader that you have your own unique wheelhouse, and you have your own particular approach to your craft, your art. And despite the many evaluations and standards, and those are essential, they're very important, there's so much more to what we do. And we need to be confident in the way that we do it. So I would just like to keep those out there for you. There is a survey that I'm linking in the chat for you. So please click on that survey. And I really appreciate you coming to this session. Like I said, it's my first time doing it. Really, your feedback is very much appreciated, and I hope to improve this program and to make it better and to promote efficacy in our students and in you and me. Matters. Thanks, you guys.